doing while it's doing the setup there. So we can definitely take a look at some of the formatting stuff, especially since APA is pretty new for most folks. So that's something we can definitely take a look at. And let me make this a little bigger so you can see it better. Okay. And as far as APA goes, the cover page or the title page, some teachers may require it, some teachers don't. I'm not picky as long as I have either the title page or that little header at the top of the first page. Either is fine. And in terms of what you add, you don't have to actually put the assignment due date, just the date itself.
I took that out in my
no worries.
final.
Okay.
I looked at some other people, so I was like, they don't have that in there. Maybe that's it.
And some teachers, they'll ask you, in addition to doing Chandler Gilbert Community College, they'll also ask you to put the department in. That's not required. So if you wanted to do that, it would just be something, because it's CCL at Chandler Gilbert, so it's Composition, Creative Writing, and Literature, I think.
Okay.
So we're not actually the English department. We're something a little more complicated and weird. Okay. Rhetorical start. And titles, usually, you don't have to necessarily do the title of the assignment. You can come up with a creative title that reflects what the ideas of your actual essay are.
Okay.
It's kind of like whenever we're looking for like sources and things on the library, the first thing we see is the title, right? So that title has to kind of tell us what exactly we're going to be looking at. And while this is really straightforward, the rhetorical strategies of 4 agreements, the rhetorical lens text, that's just fine. But you can get a little bit more creative.
Okay. I was like puzzled. I'm like, how can I creatively word this? But
and it's kind of like, think about the impact that this particular text had on you. So it's like, what does it make you do? What does it make you think? Like for my example, the one that I used in describing how to approach the project, the power of myth, I might go, the ethos of Joseph Campbell, how it impacted my professional life.
Okay. Awesome.
And so that might be just the way that you go about it. This title, perfectly fine. It just think that it could be something of a rhetorical appeal of your own.
Okay.
So when we use titles are what we call that paralinguistic text. They're not necessarily part of the analysis, but they're part of what we communicate about our message. So that's kind of what's around our text, right? So a title can be just as important as what you actually say in the essay for getting people attracted to and appealing to them rhetorically. Right. So, like with this one, very straightforward. We know what we're going to get. You're using the proper vocabulary, so it's a little bit of a mix of ethos and logos, right?
Right.
But if you wanted to appeal to your reader, you talking about how, because later in your draft you talk about how Kairos is connected to the other 3. So that might be something where you talk about timing, or you talk about how this particular text was something that you needed at that point in your life to kind of make everything mesh. So, and that matches what you're talking about with Kairos, which is Kairos is what makes everything else, the other 3 appeals, come together.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then, so for me, I actually kind of had a slightly different opinion about what your thesis was, because your thesis is what should be kind of talking about the balance of the rhetorical appeals and introducing us to it, using the story you put in your proposal, which you did in the first paragraph. And then it's fine, especially as we start to get into these longer essays for college, if your thesis isn't necessarily in the first paragraph, it should be very soon after in the second, which is what you did here for me. So you talked about the combination of the rhetorical strategies, and how Kairos was a way of bringing them all together. You explain that really well here. You stick to and you break up and you organize each of the rhetorical appeals really well. So that you cited everything quite well. You have each of your in-text citations. There was one of the web page where you didn't necessarily have a date. Whenever that happens, especially like if you're looking at an author's profile, oftentimes we want to go all the way to the end, and we want to look at that copyright date.
Gotcha.
So the copyright date is something that we could use because that's saying that they have made this up to date at this point.
Gotcha. Okay.
So for that source, you might have to kind of go back and take a look at your in-text citations and just change that to the 2022 in your in-text citation as well.
Copy. Cool.
All right. But you have each of your in-text citations. There was a couple of places where I felt like there was a lot that you summarized from some of the sources, and I'll talk about what that looks like down below. But Carly has a good comment. I would love to hear a little bit more of what those experiences were that make him this expert author. So that could be something where you go back to his website where you're talking about his life experiences, what he's been through, this, because you talk about it a little bit later, where it's like his parents were Toltec shaman. It was something that it was all about, they were a group of people that were carrying on this very important, very endangered tradition. So that would be something that we would want a little bit more information about.
Perfect. And then in my final draft too, I took her advice, and then I talked about, like, I added how his parents were also physicians, and how he was the youngest of 13 children, and his siblings were in the medical field, and how they inspired him to go through medical school, and where he gained his experience through his parental influences in college and stuff like that. So I went into that a little bit more in depth.
And again,
if
you would just make sure you cite wherever you got that information from.
Okay.
All right. And then your analysis about kind of what this means. Perfect. It's kind of like the old song, "You Think This Song Is About You" by Carly Simon. You always, it's all about me. I feel this personal connection. So but you're talking about that very much, about this idea that what he's saying has such a deep connection to your way of thinking about yourself. Right. That's strict. That is as much pathos as you can get.
Right.
Okay. And you have great quotes throughout from the text itself, which is perfect. The only thing that's missing is whenever you do a direct quote in APA, you always have to have the citation and the page number after every single quote. So it will be Ruiz, 1997, comma, page number.
Okay.
And it just has to be it's P and number.
Yep.
But the only time that you need a page number in APA is direct quotes like that.
Gotcha.
So for each of these, even if it's a short quote, if it's in quotation marks, we need it.
Okay.
Is that the only one?
Yeah, I would looked up other videos too, just because I like to pull things from multiple sources. It's just kind of the way that my mind works. So just so I can make sure that I have good comprehension with that. And one of them had said, don't just use one quote for a whole bunch of stuff, but I didn't really understand the concept of anything else. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, quotes are funny. And different teachers will have different approaches. Like for some reason, I think in a lot of high schools right now, they're teaching you should use direct quotations because it's much stronger. I'm like, not so much. It's actually better to kind of paraphrase or summarize different things. Right. So if this is literally be impeccable with your word is exactly what he says, we do have to put quotation marks. Okay. But you can always summarize some of these agreements. And the idea of how, if we say don't take anything personally, we can say he says we shouldn't take certain things to heart would be a way of summarizing that, and then you wouldn't, or paraphrasing that, and you wouldn't need to have the page number in that case.
Gotcha.
So, and sometimes paraphrases and summaries can be more powerful in an analysis because what that's showing your teacher and your reader is that you have gone through the process of internalizing, analyzing, and here's how you understand it. So sometimes paraphrases and summaries are far more powerful tools than direct quotes. But in this case, I think because we're looking at examples from the text, and we're doing a rhetorical analysis of the text, having quotes like this is perfect.
Okay, awesome.
It just depends on the kind of analysis you're trying to do. Okay, all right. And then you have the one small thing, the periods always go after the citation.
Okay, yeah, so that was the one where I kind of threw in Ruiz 1997 to try to cover everything that was in the paragraph.
Right.
So I was like not really sure exactly how to do that. And
basically what the rule is, and this is fine, you put it at the end of the paragraph, that's great.
Okay.
But any piece of information that comes from a source, whether it's a direct quote, a summary, a paraphrase, whatever, you want to put it at the end of the sentence where you use that information, because you kind of go back and forth between information from the text and your analysis. When we do that, don't feel like you're putting in too many citations.
Okay,
that's
what I was like, am I going to be putting in too many? I'm like, is this going to seem repetitive?
No. Even if it's from the same source, once we kind of move away from information from the source and into our own analysis, we want to make it really clear that what is your information and what is the source's information. So that's how we avoid plagiarism. If it's something like where you just stuck it at the end of the paragraph like this, it wouldn't be clear what your analysis is and what your quotes are. Because you have quotes, it makes it a little easier. But like if you're using paraphrasing and summarizing later on in more complicated advanced assignments, it becomes less clear what you're claiming is your analysis and what you're claiming is information from the source. So we want to make that really clear. Cite everything.
Okay.
If you feel like you're oversighting things, you're probably on the right track.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Okay. And then same up here, just another formatting thing. The quotation marks come before the citation. So like, let me do this real quick so it's clearer. So, there we go. Okay, and when you start talking about Kairos, this is where it was a little less clear.
Okay.
On how you were. I was just kind of, this was clarification for me. So were you saying that Kairos was dependent on the other rhetorical appeals? Or if it's something where you kind of talking about this blending, is it dependence or is it something that makes the connection?
Definitely something that makes the connection, because I feel like it makes the logos, pathos, and ethos a little bit more amplified, because it's like the way that the book is written has like the tone of very much so like it's very encouraging, very like you can do this, and it's like he's using the other appeals in a chaotic way, basically to like emphasize his narrative.
Okay. All right, and I know you didn't talk too much about logos. So what you might consider doing before you go into Kairos is talk about why logos is there, but it's maybe not as strong as the ethos and pathos.
Right.
So it's kind of amount. Let's try that again. There we go. So it's kind of like all the balance of the rhetorical appeals that we use are decisions that we make as writers. So we have to decide how much of each of the rhetorical appeals to use to be the most effective text possible.
Okay.
So in this case, Ruiz is talking very much about things that are psychological as well as spiritual. So pathos is going to take a big chunk of the rhetorical appeal balance in that case.
Right.
And because his ethos, who he is, his life experiences, ethos is then supporting the pathos. Kairos connects those together. But when we think about logos is those testable truths, right?
Right.
Because pathos is so prominent in this particular text, using a whole lot of logos may not be attractive to the audience that Ruiz is trying to speak to. Now,
Gotcha.
so it's kind of like this idea of, the testable truths could be things like, here are the life experiences. So when you, especially in some of the quotes that you're using, in the pathos space, where was I? A lot of these are things that people count as both personal little t truths, because it's kind of been tested emotionally, socially, psychologically. Don't make assumptions. Don't take anything personally. And what was our last one? Always do your best. It's this idea of those little those personal, experiential, emotional truths. They might not be true for everybody, but what we have found throughout our own kind of history of social history is that these are things that oftentimes help people live a healthy and productive emotional life. So there's that little tiny bit of logos that this has been tried. These are concepts and approaches to life that have been tested over and over again. And while they might not be completely true for everybody,
Gotcha.
they are things that socially we can say this is something where the logos is tied to the pathos.
Gotcha.
He's talking about truths that have been kind of tested over time. And while they may not always be true, I think, that these are things that can be said to be true of what humans need emotionally. And
Gotcha.
so it's kind of like logos is hidden, essentially.
Right.
But we do want to talk about that before we go into Kairos, because you talk about Kairos being, where did I go? Being that thing that connects all of the other three together.
Okay.
And then I was kind of curious, did this whole big section here, this was all from the one Olson source, right?
Yes, because the Olson source was, I believe, the interview that Olson had done with Don Miguel Ruiz.
Okay, so this is you summarizing the information from that.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I was like, that's a long set of information, and I looked at it and I'm like, it's probably all from the same source, but I want to double check. Because you can always mix sources together. Like, if there's stuff that you think would be really important to put in there, like the youngest of 13 children, that could be something that you put into that spot. If it's, it's part of a specific experience, so maybe not. But if there's like,
I actually need to put that citation up above in a couple of paragraphs, because that's where I got the youngest of 13 children.
Yeah. So you would just have the Ruiz 2022 done.
Perfect.
Okay. But yeah, if you wanted to mix citations, like if there was stuff from the website or any other thing that related to this experience specifically, that all you would do is you would put a semicolon after this. So, like, for example, Olson 2013, and then a semicolon, and then Ruiz 2022. And it would be the same in MLA. MLA just has the name and page number, no comma or anything, but you would use a semicolon to separate each of the sources. Okay, so that's what you do when you mix sources together in a summary or a paraphrase.
Awesome, thank you for that.
No problem. And I'll get rid of that so it doesn't get confusing later on. And yeah, where you can use Ruiz occasionally. You can always do Ruiz, the author, things like that to kind of move things around. And especially when we're not sure about pronouns, as we go into like more modern writing.
Right.
That can also be a way of making sure that you're using the correct pronouns for the authors and things of that nature. And yeah, since you mentioned the scientific research down here, I would expect this to connect to the logos.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of cool. I tried to like write a little bit about that in the paragraph that mentioned logos.
Yeah.
Um, with like how he took a look at how like atoms worked and how he noticed that like there are different energy sources that surrounded the atoms but didn't connect to them, and how he related that into spirituality.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of stuff that came out around that time that was about neo-spiritualism. I forget what it was called. It was something like Water Talks or something like that. It was like how like a lot of the scientists are looking at the radio frequencies from plants right now, and plants have their own languages. Like someone recently did a linguistic study about the language of mushrooms, and how
That's so funny. They had that on Netflix or something like that on Netflix.
yeah. So that's what it was called. It was called What the Bleep.
Ah, okay. I've heard of that.
To me, it was a little too. How do I put this? It was a little far out there.
A little far fetched.
It was a little far fetched. It was a little. What the bleep do? What was it? Is that what it was? See, I didn't feel like it was that new. I thought it was much pseudo-scientific film that posed spiritual connection with quantum physics.
Pseudo-scientific.
And that's a big way of how people are looking at a lot of things where there's this connection between spirituality. But a lot of, especially particle physicists, very much are spiritual people because they feel like the energy of the universe does all this other hoo-ha.
Right.
So, but like,
yeah, super cool because he actually used, like, in one of his interviews, he was talking about the laws of thermodynamics, and I believe it's the second law of thermodynamics that might be the first, but that energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. So he used that as like as something to connect it, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of like how I have one of my guilty pleasures is our ghost hunting shows.
I love it.
It is one of my guilty pleasures. I scare the crap out of my husband all the time watching those, but between that and true crime, I'm that 40-year-old woman who's like, those are the things I watch. But yeah, it's like those folks are trying to kind of say we can find the soul through seeing how energy moves through a room, or like why they use EMF meters and things like that. And I'm like, y'all are trying so hard. You're so cute.
Yeah. And it's so funny. They're like, did you hear that?
Yep. And I'm like, that was the house settling, literally.
Yeah.
For the
20 degrees colder right here.
You are in a house that is older than most estates in the country. No.
Probably some reasons for that might not be paranormal. Just a guess.
I'm like, simmer down. Okay.
So
it is. All right. So, but your conclusion is great. I was just, whenever we have something in our conclusion, we want to make sure that we've talked about whatever we said in that conclusion somewhere in our essay.
Right.
So that the logos is the one thing that's kind of the weakest right now.
Okay.
So again, scientific research, I would expect to see some more of that in a paragraph specifically about logos. Okay. Even if it's not the strongest one, where he's kind of interjecting the science into the pathos, you need to talk about why and how you think he's doing that.
Oh, I left an entire paragraph out about logos.
Yeah.
Didn't I? Oh, you know what? This was the paragraph about his fatal car accident and like his physical body awakening and stuff like that. That was actually meant to be geared toward logos. I just never put it in there.
Yeah, that makes comparatively so through logos. He summed up what he learned. So it's like, give us a little bit more of that. So that's why I was when I got down here to Kairos, I'm like, it kind of felt a little thrown in. We want to kind of say how logos and pathos are. Remember how I was asking whether Kairos was dependent or whether it was the connection between the other ones? Yeah. Here, it's really clear that logos and pathos are. Well, logos is dependent on the pathos.
Yeah.
So
the paragraph right before my conclusion was definitely supposed to be about logos. I did not put that in there, and I didn't catch that. So thank you. Maybe switch it around
on the pathos. Just make that clear.
Okay.
Once you do that, that will strengthen this a whole lot. All right, now let's take a look at your citations. You did a great job. You have references centered at the top. It's on its own page. You used page break from as we kind of remember from WAC 101. Everything's alphabetized. Just remember, proper names still get capitalized if they're in the part of the title. So like Don Miguel Ruiz, that gets capitalized. Gotcha. For agreements does not.
Okay, copy. I wasn't sure because it was like, I guess it would make sense because, I almost say, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I just kind of went through and I noted which parts should be and which parts shouldn't be capitalized.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
So just to switch things around, you have your containers italicized, which is perfect. You have your links. Let me double check. That was the other one I wanted to double check the date on. What just happened? There we go.
And I think I do need to throw, because I did a poll. I think I need to cite this guy a little bit more.
Okay. Even if you only cite him once in your essay, we still have the citations. But if you can add more, oops. I know they have made this more accessible, but the big text makes my eyes swim.
It's this one, honestly, like the format of it is not that great. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little bit like uninteresting. I'm like, well, it's got good information in it, but it couldn't be more or less appealing than with the format of it. It's very boring. And you can't really tell like when it starts and when it ends. It's all over the place.
Yeah. And sometimes what they hide dates of things in particular, like this looks like it's a blog, but it's him kind of going over things. So sometimes you want to kind of see if you can click through to the specific a blog. It's not letting me click on the title, so that means that this is just, that's where it is, and it's going down into the next read. So there's no specific date. He doesn't have the date listed up here in the URL. Okay, so no date, that's fine.
No, I didn't even know you could look for the date in the URL.
Yeah, no, it's like, it's one of these things, they hide stuff. They hide authors, they hide dates, they hide and just all the kind of like information you need for citing things. Those things can be hidden. But sometimes we can also search. Let's do this. For agreement summary. Like if we search a web page, it'll give you like results and things. So sometimes, and I should have used Boolean search terms. Just thinking real hard. Okay, no, it's not going to let me find what date it was, so the no date is perfect there.
Perfect.
Okay. But other than the capitalizations, this looks perfect. You have your hanging indent, and it's clear that you use the hanging indent formatting tool. You use the page break tool, so this is great. Yeah, so just here for you, just the capitalizations are the only issue. And yeah, with this one, where like the A is capitalized again, perfect, because we have that semicolon in the title. That means we have to start the capitalization over again.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And like down here, inspired, this would normally be capitalized anyway because it's a proper name, but if it was like, inspired, a story of Don Juan Miguel Ruiz, the A would be capitalized. Okay, and that's it. So I'm gonna stop the recording here real quick.